Good morning. The content of today's presentation. I'll start with the purpose, a short introduction, South African crash statistics for 2019, heavy vehicle statistics for 2019, estimated cost of crashes for South Africa adjusted as well as related to heavy vehicles, and hazardous road segments for heavy vehicles. And please note, at the end of the presentation, the last two slides, all literature and websites or references made in this presentation is indicated in the reference slides. So let's start with the purpose. The purpose of my presentation is basically information sharing. We all know that without information we are powerless. So as I said earlier, I'll be sharing crash statistics 2019 as well as heavy vehicle fatal crashes, the whens, the where, the why, and the cost thereof. The high number of road traffic crashes and the associated consequences have a significant impact on the South African society, which continues to hamper socio-economic development and impact on the well-being of all South Africans, so stated in the cost of crashes that was published in 2016. We cannot accept that 13,000 people are killed on our roads due to crashes on an annual basis. We need to understand what the freight or heavy vehicle contribution is towards fatal crashes in South Africa. Where do these fatal crashes occur, as well as the cost thereof? For the purposes of this presentation, when I talk about a heavy vehicle, please remember that it includes all vehicles larger than 3,500 kilogram gross mass, which obviously includes articulated trucks. And when I talk about a heavy vehicle crash, that means, or a heavy vehicle fatal crash, that means there was one or more fatalities in that crash, as well as one or more heavy vehicle. So, South Africa road casualties from 1980. In 1980, there was about 7,500 deaths on South African roads, and it went up and down up to a peak in 2006, 15,500, and came down until 2019, where 12,503 fatal crashes were reported. That is a reduction from 2006 to 2019 of about 18.9% and about 3,000 deaths. If we look at the ratios to put these fatal crashes and fatalities in perspective, also to measure from country to country, these are international ratios. Fatal crashes per 10,000 registered motor vehicles, as well as fatal crashes per 100,000 of a country's human population, also referred to as a death rate. So both these ratios in South Africa has come down since 2010. If we look at the death rate, in 2010 it was 27.8, until 2019, 21.4. So yes, we are on a downward trend and have been over the past, say, 10 years. If we look at historic crashes for exactly the same parameters, the blue line being fatal crashes per 10,000 registered motor vehicles, 9.5 for South Africa in 2019, and we need to note that this is the lowest it has ever been in South Africa. In 2016, the National Road Safety Strategy was published. Within the national strategy, a new target was set on top of the Decade of Action target for us to halve our fatalities in South Africa by 50% in 2030 from 2016. So if we measure our output over the last 3 years, we have shown a reduction in fatalities of 1,568. But let us not be too confident. We need to compare ourselves to see where we fall, whether we are good or not. So this is the statistics that I showed in the previous slides. South Africa from 1980, 7,500 to 12,503, which is about 5,000 more. South Africa has got a human population of 58.4, registered self-propelled motorized vehicles 11.4, with a death rate, as I showed, 21.4. So let's have a look at the UK. And the reason why I picked the UK is because they had similar fatalities in 1980, and they have a similar human population. And in 1980, they had 6,000 fatalities, and in 2019, 1,783. Now, they've got a human population, they've got more people than us, they've got more motorized vehicles, almost 4 times more self-propelled vehicles, and with a death rate of 2.6 per 100,000 of human population, which is much lower than in South Africa. If you look at the two graphs, it's almost an inverse of one another, with the UK reducing fatalities from 6,000 an annum to 1,783 in 2019. So the question should be asked, where did we go wrong? Today is only statistical information sharing, so I'm not going to delve into where did we go wrong. In line with the previous slide, just to show where South Africa fits in, where the 21, the death rate of 21 versus the 2.3 of United Kingdom fits in. Here's an extract of figure 5 road fatalities per 100,000 inhabitants. 2018 data. It was published in the IRTAT Road Safety Manual Report for 40 countries. United Kingdom with their 2.3 was the third best country. Morocco, the first African country, was just over 10, their death rate. And South Africa, 22.38. It's not a good picture. So we need to work towards reducing that 13,000 deaths on our roads every year. The next session of the presentation, heavy vehicle statistics for 2019. On 31 December 2019, the live vehicle population, we had self-propelled vehicles registered 11.5 million, with about 3.3% of those being heavy vehicles. The total fatal crashes for South Africa for all types of vehicles and road users in 2019 was 10,381, with the heavy vehicle fatal crashes being 9.9% of those fatal crashes, or 1,028 fatal crashes, where one or more person died and one or more heavy vehicle was involved. In addition to that, total vehicles involved in all fatal crashes, 13,328, and heavy vehicles at 1,128 vehicles, about 8.5% of all the vehicles that were involved in fatal crashes. And as I said previously, heavy vehicles is only 3.3% of all the registered vehicles. But we need to take into account that heavy vehicles do travel more vehicle kilometers than the norm. To split up the heavy vehicles, it's 3 categories. Your gross vehicle mass larger than 3,500 kilogram, and then your articulated trucks. So for your smaller heavy vehicles, 42%. For your larger vehicles, 57%. It's close. It's almost. If we look at deaths that was recorded in those 1,028 heavy vehicle crashes in 2019, 36.4% of those were passengers that died. 24.1% pedestrians, a bit lower than for when all vehicles are taken into account, and driver deaths, 37.1% of the 1,339 people that died in the heavy vehicle crashes. The crash severity for heavy vehicles, or the number of deaths per crash, so it's 1.3 deaths on average per heavy vehicle fatal crash, is 1.3, whereas for when all vehicles are taken into account, it's 1.22, so it's much higher crash severity for heavy vehicles. Then just another statistical statistic that I would like to share: the male deaths, female deaths, it seems to be 80-20. It was in 2019. And the urban-rural split of where these 1,028 fatal crashes occurred, as reported, is 45.2% urban and rural 54.8%, almost 50-50 split on where these crashes occur. Now, if we look at heavy vehicle fatal crashes per month, it's actually fairly even in all the months except for January, February, March, which shows much less fatal heavy vehicle crashes. The average is 8.3% with a high of 11% in July. Heavy vehicle fatal crashes per time of day, it follows the same trend as when all vehicles are accounted for in your peak times. And something to note, in the 3 hours from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 1/5 of all fatal crashes, or 21.8%, occur. Heavy vehicle fatal crashes per day of week, very much the same for every day. Definitely not the same picture as when all vehicles are included. Now, if we look at the heavy vehicle fatal crash types, or the description of the crashes, 27.6% of those heavy vehicle fatal crashes were accidents with pedestrians. So 18.9, or almost 20%, head-ons, head-rear 12.2%, side swipe opposite direction 10.5%, single vehicle overturned 9.5%. This is the majority of the crashes, with descriptions such as side swipe, same direction, approach at an angle, even person fell off 3.4%, etc. on the descriptions of the heavy vehicle crashes. Now, if we look at the contributory factors to the fatal crashes, we've got a large proportion human contributory factors, about 83.6%, with 7% vehicle factors reported and 9.5% road and environmental factors. All contributors plotted on a graph that includes your human, your vehicle, and your road and environmental. Jaywalking 19.7, hit and run 7.2. The two together will give you the 27% pedestrian crashes, overtook in face of oncoming crashes, etc., etc., etc. And then you can't really see anymore. So what I did is I just zoomed in on this section to show you all the contributory factors, or the first part of them, the highest of them. Again, the jaywalking, hit and run, overtook in face of oncoming traffic, etc., etc. Now, with the human factors being so dominant, your tire burst only comes in at 2.2%, which is the highest of the vehicle factors, and the highest of the road and environmental factors is 1.7% of the total amount of factors. That's split up. Now, if we only look at the human factors, as I said, the 19.7 and the 7.2, it gives you an idea of which of the human factors were most prevalent in these fatal crashes. Vehicle factors: tire burst prior to accident, so reported by SAPS, 2.2% of the total. Brakes faulty, 1.8%. This is to serious problem areas. It might even be that this is underreported. Other types of vehicle factors, it's a problem, the reporting part of it, but it still shows that vehicle factors is one of the lower part of thing, with human factors extorting the whole contributory factor. So the next portion of the presentation, cost of crashes, South Africa. I'm sure you are all aware of the 2016 published cost of crashes report in South Africa, where we then estimated the cost of all crashes in South Africa to be 140.9 billion rand for 2015. Now, what we did from 2015 or until we published, we adjust the cost of crashes on an annual basis with CPI and the number of crashes and the number of fatalities, etc. And for 2019, we estimate the cost of crashes for the 2019 year only to be 170.6 billion rand, with the unit cost for a death estimated 4.7 million rand, and the unit cost for, on average, a fatal crash being 6.6 million rand in South Africa. So if we take the calculations that was published in the cost of crashes document, and we estimate the cost of crashes for heavy vehicles, again larger than 3,500 kilogram of gross vehicle mass, adjusted to 2019, the estimated unit cost for one heavy vehicle crash is about 10 million rand. Then it being 9.9% of all fatal crashes, about 10 billion rand estimated heavy vehicle cost to the economy, heavy vehicle crashes for 2019. The hazardous road segments for heavy vehicles, the last section in the presentation. The RTMC developed and maintains a hazardous road segment model, whereas a weighted ratio is determined for each of the road sections within a SAPS area in South Africa. So it means it's a road number like the N3 within the Harry Smith area. A weighted ratio is calculated for each of those, with 50% weight added to the previous year, 2019, 25%, 15%, and 5% each for year 4 and 5. And then you get your weighted ratio. It's basically sort from highest to lowest for whichever you choose, provinces, all provinces, or per province, or fatal crash type. For this presentation, heavy vehicle fatal crashes. So if you look at the top 10 in the country based on the weighted ratio model, it's N3 Harry Smith, N4 Nelspruit, N11 Middelburg Mpumalanga, and so on. If we do some calculations only for the top 10, we will see in the top 10, in 2019, there was 52 fatal crashes on the in the top 10 road segments, which is 5.1% of the total. The top 20, 90 fatal crashes. It's just, well, the top 10 I showed you now, 11 to 20, these ones. And, or 8, top 50, 163 fatal crashes in 2019. And the top 100, 252 fatal crashes in 2019. So 24.5% of all the fatal crashes occurred in the top 100 hazardous road segments, or a quarter or 252 fatal crashes where heavy vehicles were involved occurred in 100 road segments that we can identify or did identify. Lastly, the reference, as promised, for all the documentation that was used to compile the presentation, and my email address. I thank you.